We'll get the beginning, the meanderings before the actual conversation.
All right, this is officially our first podcast, so go easy on us. We didn't plan much, didn't rehearse, just set up a mic and started talking. I'm Forrest Weber, host of this podcast, and my guest today is David Hutchinson, the CEO and founder of Oomhz Cacao, a dear friend of mine. This episode's a bit of a meander, but if you stick around, there's gold in the chaos. We get into how handcrafted chocolate turns into a spiritual tuning fork, the logistics nightmare of building a CPG brand with soul, wholesale versus DTC for solopreneurs, how 50,000 units changes everything, scaling handcrafted products without losing heart, market intuition versus data, and why Venus always heralds the sun. Plus some thoughts on gnomes, nuns, and chocolate bar assembly lines.
What's really interesting about chocolate is it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper the larger you go. A machine that costs twice as much can probably make 4 times as much chocolate.
When do you cross the line between handcrafted to mass production or whatever the alternative is?
Yeah, so right now I'm hand pouring every single chocolate bar right here. There's a no man's land. Jesus.
That's what you were saying, right?
A no man's land.
Tell me if you know this, but if there's like 50 of those same CPG guys in a room, how many of them are going to be handcrafted type?
I would say about 10, 15.
10%.
Like if I had 10 people hand pouring molds, like I could still call it handcrafted.
Or 100 gnomes.
Or 100 gnomes. I'm just still imagining that. It makes me smile.
Fortunately, we have beautiful footage of you melanging, tempering, shaking.
Unfortunately, are just really tough. And the shipping solutions. And, a lot of times they make you purchase in bulk because then they can absorb the shipping costs easier. And it doesn't make sense to ship, a pint of milk across the country when it's like, no, we'll make you buy, a couple gallons. And then, so there are economies of scale when it comes to D2C and shipping solutions, and just the expense of that for ultimately though, that expense all falls on the consumer. Otherwise you don't have a viable business. Yeah, the business is probably all those costs, then you just, Do
you think if you were talking in a room to like 50 consumer packaged goods newbie solopreneurs.
Yeah. That's a good.
Like half of them would be like, I need to do more wholesale.
Yeah. From like my friends in CPG and I would say 50-50.
Yeah.
I think some products are kind of built from a standpoint of they'll be pretty much all D2C, and that's great. That's cool. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
It'll be like something that you'll see on TikTok and Instagram, and they'll just, obviously their margins, they can have higher margins. They can afford to pay influencers a lot. They can, do all that stuff.
I have no clue. Tell me if you know this, but if there's like 50 of those same CPG guys in a room, how many of them are going to be handcrafted type? Good. Like yours is handcrafted. And fortunately, we have so much beautiful footage of you melanging, tempering, shaking. Is it that intense for 50 out of 50, or is it 10% of them?
Yeah, I would say about 10, 15.
10%?
Yeah, and it depends on what level of skill you're at. I have a buddy that makes salsa, and it's very cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
For him to make it at a small scale and at a medium scale, because if he were to get a co-packer, he would need an enormous amount of capital to make a batch.
Do you know how much?
Do I know what his margin? I know what his margins are right now.
Well, nothing private here, but when you said that, I immediately thought of 2 friends of mine who have made their own salsa. Who I'm like, whoa, these questions right now are actually relevant for some of my friends.
Yeah. In terms of the number of units that they would need to purchase, we're talking 50,000 plus units of salsa
to get
in
a
one
co-packer
order.
for salsa.
Yeah. That would probably be a small. Like we're talking, Generally speaking,
Wow, that's a lot.
100,000 plus.
So no one out there is like, I'll do it 20,000.
Yeah.
No co-packers will do it.
Or it's really freaking expensive per unit. And
Yeah.
so then, and the co-packer, there's a fixed cost to getting somebody set up, getting the recipe, testing the line. You're basically renting, if you can imagine it this way, you're renting supply, the production time, and you're also paying the facility to figure it out, to change things over. If you've got, if you're using a special jar, it's a
Yeah.
non-standard jar size. Well,
Yeah.
now the machines have to be calibrated to be, we need a different attachment for this machine. And then, oh my gosh.
I would think it would be easier than chocolate though. Why do I think
Yeah.
that?
Oh,
Like,
for
what are they gonna
salsa?
yeah,
Yeah.
are they gonna make you do a $250,000 minimum for chocolate if you ever wanna get a co-packer?
I've heard, specifically because I watch a lot of like podcasts and
Yeah.
other guys that have done chocolate.
Yeah.
I know that finding somebody that will do less than 100,000
Is
is
really
really hard.
Wow.
Yeah, units. Yeah,
Well, that's
yeah,
beautiful. I mean, that's almost like the question on my mind next
yeah.
is gonna be, how do you think about scaling in a handcrafted CPG business?
That is the single most scary aspect of my business, is because there's a gap between scaling my production and then jumping to a co-packer.
Yeah.
There's a no man's land.
A
And so navigating that no man's land.
man.
Oh, Jesus.
That's what you were saying, right? A
No,
man.
a no man's land. Hopefully my silly will come in clutch then.
What if you got all the gnomes to pack them?
Oh, let's go. Perfect solution. Perfect solution. I need those little hands to be able to.
Yeah, right.
It'll be like Ratatouille, but it'll be like no Matui. I don't know. So basically where I'm at is, what's really interesting about chocolate is it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper the larger you go. Because the machines, a machine that costs twice as much can probably make 4 times as much chocolate. And then the energy efficiency actually goes up too, surprisingly or surprisingly not. Is at scale, you just have more and more and more and more efficiency. And so efficiency is profit. Efficiency is lower cost of the finished product. And so what happens is, you get to a point where I can afford to purchase more equipment. I can afford to get bigger equipment. As I'm making more sales, I can afford to hire more people. I can afford to pay for larger space, until you get to this big enough size where you're like, hey, we can make, let's say 50,000, let's say, yeah, we can make 50,000 bars a month, and with maybe a staff of 3 or 4 people, and the right equipment. Now you're getting to the point where you're talking about millions of dollars of equipment, and you could finance that, and you could look at your revenue, and you could, amortize that over, X number of years. You could get some investors. So now you're getting to the point where you're like, all right, people are really consuming our product. We can really get this going. Well, now you get to a point where your demand and supply elasticity, I would almost say, if you're not using those machines all the time, they're costing you money when they're not being used. And so by going to a co-packer, the co-packer is dealing with, a machine broke and now they have to fix it. Oh, the machine, their production line is down for 2 weeks. They're eating the cost of that.
Yeah.
They're eating, all their employees got the flu.
Yeah.
All of that mess they deal with. And so, a company I would say that really stands out to me is Midday Squares. They were producing in Canada. They actually had a specialty enough product that the co-packers that they were going to were like, we're going to need a different machine. We're not going to invest in that machine. Or B, the ones that they could find that would make it we're charging them way too much and requiring way too high of a minimum order quantity. And what happens is, if maybe I sell 1 million chocolate bars in a year, but if and so maybe I can order 1 million chocolate bars at a time. But now, by the time you get to month 9, 10, 11, the chocolate bars are 9, 10, 11 months old. And so there's an aspect of like, you want to keep the product fresh and you want to be producing it as fast as it's being consumed, but you also need to be cognizant of
Yeah.
the batches, not
Yeah.
just the velocity. I didn't say that perfectly, but
No, it's just supply chain operations in a way, and it
yeah,
makes sense. It's difficult to do that stuff. It reminds me a little bit of, I have that small Amazon e-commerce business,
yeah,
and when I'm considering using like FBA versus FBM, fulfilled by Amazon, fulfilled by merchant, it's
yeah,
not the exact same, but I'm self-reflecting while you talk about chocolate, thinking I love using FBA simply because, yeah, they take care of everything. They charge the fees. They charge a
mhm,
huge chunk of the profits, basically.
yeah,
It's a
yeah,
scale, but they also have a sophisticated supply chain management process where they have orders tracked across the US, major nodes, minor nodes, and they
yep,
keep inventory levels just right. I mean, there's no guarantee with them. They're just good at it.
yeah,
But with FBM, if it's a Saturday night at 10 p.m. and we've promised like a certain shipping rate,
yeah,
sometimes we have a 3PL, third party logistics company. Sometimes they don't ship it till Monday.
mm,
And it's usually, I just give a full refund to the customer if it was FBM and we didn't get it there on time.
yeah, yeah,
Because I had a guy one time, we have a product that's related to sitting and chairs, and he was going to the hospital for like a heart surgery. And he wanted them there
wow,
when he got home from the surgery by Monday at this time.
yep,
So we ordered them expedited, and like they didn't get there. And he got home from surgery with no pleasant.
no solution to his needs, yeah, uh,
So, anyways, it's not the exact same. But when I hear you process why it would be nice, it reminds me of that too.
yeah, yeah, and so
But the handcrafted part of it,
yeah,
is that, I mean, you're talking about machines, bigger
yeah,
machines, and then a big facility.
and then a big
When do
facility,
you
yeah,
cross the line between the, handcrafted
yeah.
to mass production or whatever the alternative is?
Yeah, so I mean, right now I'm hand pouring every single chocolate bar right here. Boom.
Yeah.
And I have a funnel, hit the lever, point. Oh, I put in, not quite enough. Oh, got to do a little bit more. It's very manual. And so the next step beyond that would be to hand pour or hand fill the molds from a machine with like a foot pedal or an automatic dosing head. So you're still manually inserting every mold. Psh, it pours the chocolate out. You put it on the vibrating table and whatnot. So you're still handling them. Next step above that is an automated, different degrees of automated molding lines. And so you can have, uh, when you get up all the way to the big boy level, you can have a 100% fully automated autonomous where there's no human interaction. You put the molds in over here and you get finished product out over here and the machines, magically
It
doing
doesn't
everything.
melange and temper though, does it? It's
No,
just
no,
the
no, no.
pouring part. Okay.
It's just the molding part. Yeah.
So is it a process question, or is it like microbreweries in Colorado have a quantity,
Yeah.
50,000 or less
Yeah.
cans for you? I don't know. I'm making this up.
Yeah. Because of the size of the vat.
Something like
Yeah.
that. I don't know. You know
Yeah.
better than I would.
It's all gonna come down to, like, the vat sizes, and if you have 4 vats or you have 8 vats or you have 16 vats, now you can have more of a rotation. You can have 3 vats be 1 beer, you can have 1 vat be a specialty seasonal beer, you can have, and so it gives you a lot more flexibility, whereas, the smaller the brewery, it's like, we have this 1 batch of beer, and we have this 1 batch of beer, and we have this 1 batch of beer, and so everything is a one-off
Yeah.
in that sense. And they're gonna sell it until they're out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with chocolate, is there a number or is that not regulated really yet?
Um, sorry,
I
is there a
guess, like,
number for
yeah, it's a technical question about
yeah.
just being able to call it handcrafted. Can you continue to call it handcrafted all the way up to infinity, or do you have to at some quantity? Like now we're at
Oh,
65,000
yeah.
bars a year. We can't call it handcrafted anymore.
Oh, in terms of a legal, like, FDA definition, no, I don't think there is.
Okay.
Um,
Like I think microbreweries have, or craft breweries, there's some
have a certain
some
limit. Yeah,
regulatory language
yeah.
with it.
I'm literally using the term handcrafted because it's literally
Yeah, it
handcrafted,
is.
but I suppose, like, if
Yeah.
I had 10 people hand pouring molds, like, I could still call it handcrafted
Or 100 gnomes.
or 100 gnomes. Uh, I'm just still imagining that. It makes me smile.
Dude, that would make a
Yeah.
great video. If we could make a video with gnomes
Well,
making
hey,
the chocolates.
Sora, you
Yeah, Sora could probably
know.
do it.
I want to make it happen now. I want to make it happen now. Yeah, yeah. The gnomes in the kitchen, you know. Yeah,
But that was the only thing. I don't want to veer off though if you had more to
yeah,
say there.
yeah. So what I will say is, so let's say for instance, real quick, I'm literally thinking about this in real time. Is I could have eventually I would have a continuous tempering machine, not a batch tempering machine. And already from a batch tempering machine to a continuous tempering machine, there's just an element of,
Way
in
better.
my mind, no, that I'm losing the
Oh, some of the
handcrafted.
handcrafted.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it's not manual anymore.
that delineation between the batch tempering machine and the continuous tempering machine, to me, in my mind,
Interesting.
that's where I define, like, that's
Yeah.
where I would cut the limit. I wouldn't say handcrafted once we have a continuous tempering machine. I wouldn't. Even though it's a very manual labor
Yeah.
process, still, it just that's where I would cut it off.
When are you gonna
Yeah,
buy one?
yeah. Gosh, for like $30,000.
Oh,
And then this is relevant to the conversation is, then do you have one for every single formula? Because it's a continuous tempering machine. And so in theory, what you would do is you would load up a batch or a portion of a batch into the machine. And then as it has a minimum quantity that it can operate with. And so then you would need to keep filling it. And so some of the more automated systems will have a pump that will take it from basically the ball mill, or depending on what you're using, it could be a melanger. They make some massive melangers, or it could be a ball mill. And you would then pump it into the machine, the tempering machine, through a tube, basically. And so then you can just have that running all the time.
wow.
And so then you're not really, like, batch by batch isn't really distinguished as much, because you can have some intermixing of each batch into the next to a
Right.
degree.
Yeah, you gotta buy 4. That's gonna be
Yeah. So if you have,
120,000.
yeah, so if you have 4 formulas, you basically need 4 different machines, unless you're going to do one whole batch,
Yeah.
clean the machine
Yeah.
out, pause everything, stop everything,
Yeah.
then do the whole next batch. And so then that can create some issues where, you're like, hey, we're out of 2 batches. We're getting close to being out of 2 batches at the same time. Well, you've got to be just playing much more ahead with your batches.
You think ahead
Yeah.
better than I do.
You think ahead?
I wouldn't be thinking of that yet. Okay. So one question I have for you is, do you lean more on your intuition for brand storytelling? Are you more data-driven and analytical in numbers? What's your style?
Oh man, more intuitive. And we'll see how that pans out with the data. So yeah, I think that's kind of the natural thing for me, is like, when you don't have data, in terms of sales or numbers or the industry moving a certain way, whatnot, what data do I have? And the data that I have is in my DNA, it's in my observations, it's in my senses, it's in my relationships with people. And so that is, I would say those are all factors that go into my intuition. And so then I've got to just tap into that data set. And sometimes that really means tuning out a lot of noise, coming from the outside. And then you bring that in front of the market and you test that, and you collect the data on it. And so that's one of the reasons we're doing this rebrand, is because we made intuitive decisions, got the data on that, realized that there were certain parts of those intuitive decisions that really did make sense, that needed to be evolved even further. And then there were certain intuitive senses of that either weren't evolved enough or weren't paying attention to the real world feedback, and we just didn't have that information yet. And so moving forward, so once we relaunch the brand now, then I'm just going to be, okay, all numbers. So right
Okay.
now I'm all
No
in the creative
way.
intuitive, and then once we launch it, it'll be purely numbers. And so
Okay.
how we market, exactly the messaging around the product, that's going to be dictated by data. It's like, hey,
Okay.
this messaging isn't quite landing. This cost per click is too high.
Yeah.
The customer acquisition cost through this channel is too high, or then it will be very much a matter of data driven at that point. But I think there's some basic intuitive assumptions that
Right on.
more Rick Rubin style, where it's like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna make it fucking good for me,
Yeah.
and know that that's gonna tap into something else in other people that recognizes and relates to that same like intrinsic goodness. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So
I love it. And it reminds me of some of our conversations we have about ourselves and our life history. And
yeah,
when we learn, even looking back on our lives, how certain intuitions in us were creating relationship connections with others. And we didn't even necessarily know why, but I think those touch on intuition. And
yeah,
it kind of reminds me, this is not necessarily for the podcast, but, I sent you that text that said Venus heralds the sun.
yes,
To
yes,
me, it's a question. I don't really understand if we're meant to learn from nature that intuition, heralds the big sun, like the logic, the reason, the light. Because she's braver. She comes out first in the morning
yeah,
before if you want to go with the traditional esoteric. And similarly, even at night, I mean, Sirius B is the first star. It's the first star. Venus is a planet.
mm,
So Sirius B is the star of Isis, the queen mother in Egypt, the
yeah,
wife of Osiris.
yeah,
So you have the moon out and you have Sirius. It's always feminine elements that come out first.
yeah. Yeah, which ladies first,
Ladies
makes me
first,
think
come on.
ladies first, yeah,
Dude. Yeah.
yeah.
That would be that. You should have texted me that back when I said Venus heralds the sun. The ladies first.
Well, because I feel like, I mean, kind of what you're saying, but haven't said exactly, is that intuition leads before logic. That somehow this like more feminine energy, you come out with that, and then maybe you morph it or form it, or make the precise alignments and adjustments afterwards, but
Yeah.
that the birth of it
Yeah.
is a feminine thing, and
Yeah.
it's just a natural, pure, raw thing, and then you kind of shape it and adjust it and make sure it's aligned the way that you need it to be aligned. But
Yeah.
genuinely, I mean, I think that really does kind of describe at least my process. That might
Yeah.
not be the best process, but in terms of my how I would approach it,
I don't know.
yeah,
I
yeah,
do know that we can get caught in the weeds as males or females in our egos with masculine feminine concept. But so I don't mean to say this in that sense, but
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
she's not the brightest light.
yeah.
When she
She's
comes
not
out
the
first, she's the bravest light. And then the sun comes and it's
yeah,
much bigger.
yeah, yeah,
But it doesn't erase the fact, I mean, her path, even though, have you ever seen Venus's path over time? The
yeah. That
5-petaled flower, and
Yeah,
that teaches us so much geometry.
yeah,
And you don't have that just from seeing the day. You only have that from seeing that over time. I mean, if the least amount of force required is the way to go and pushing on things, the
mm,
brightest light is the best light. So,
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
a wrap.
yeah.
Hey, I just want to say thank you so much if you're still watching. If you do like listening to David talk about his journey, what he's up to, I have 2 more hours of content that I need to edit. I'll publish them soon. If you want to be notified, be sure to hit subscribe, like this video, pass it on to your friends. I had a blast talking to David. He's always fun to chat with. If you liked it too, stay tuned.